We're going to be reading today about symbols. This is a topic covered in other chapters, but we'll go over what you may have missed in previous chapters. Language plays a role in how we regard ourselves, how we regard others, and the world. The words we use are choices that represent our attitudes. And in the unwatched mind, we adopt words without discrimination, and unconscious expressions can creep in. In the healed mind, we adopt a new language with new symbols of forgiveness, healing, and oneness. Join us as we explore this path to a new perception. Hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. I'm your host, Jonica, and our reader today is Julie C.
Power cannot oppose, for opposition would weaken it, and weakened power is a contradiction in ideas. Weak strength is meaningless, and power used to weaken is employed to limit. And therefore it must be limited and weak, because that is its purpose. Power is unopposed to be itself. No weakness can intrude on it without changing it into something it is not. To weaken is to limit and impose an opposite that contradicts the concept that it attacks. And by this does it join to the idea a something it is not and make it unintelligible. Who can understand a double concept such as weakened power or hateful love?
Uh, in answer to that question, no one can understand such a concept, for it makes no sense because it's a contradiction in terms. So they introduce this symbol right up front about power, and it will helps to read the whole section and then come back because you can understand the beginning after you've reached the end. So power in the context of today's reading is holy power. It's the power of unlimited love, the power of creator and of creation. It's power that the Holy Spirit honors and recognizes. And whether you know it or not, you were given the power of creation in when you were created. So this would be a spiritual power that exists within you, but we would acknowledge that in the world, this is not well understood and is confused, and therefore contradictory ideas about the power arise, such as weakened power or hateful power. Uh, so the world is full of a misunderstanding about your spiritual power. And that's exactly what the Holy Spirit is here to help with, is to distinguish these spiritual concepts from worldly misunderstandings, help you to distinguish between them so that you can bring clarity to your mind and understand your true nature. I, I'm going off the record here as saying that I believe unless you understand your spiritual power, you do not understand yourself. You might think of yourself in other terms other than spiritual power, and that would be a huge omission. So, power is intended to be used for a holy purpose.
You have decided that your brother is a symbol for a hateful love, a weakened power, and above all, a living death. And so he has no meaning to you, for he stands for what is meaningless. He represents a double thought, where half is canceled out by the remaining half. Yet even this is quickly contradicted by the half it canceled out, and so they both are gone. And now he stands for nothing. Symbols which but represent ideas that cannot be must stand for empty space and nothingness. Yet nothingness and empty space cannot be interference. What can interfere with the awareness of reality is the belief that there is something there.
Mhm. So what was just read might not be easy to decipher at first, but is fundamental to all of what we're talking about today. So we need to break it down, take it in parts, and understand. We're talking initially about why are people so confused regarding themselves, their relationships, life. Well, it has to do with ideas in your mind that are all contorted and twisted. They mention here a double thought, like a hateful love is a double thought. Well, is it hate or is it love? And since it's two thoughts at once that contradict each other, when you combine them together, it makes no sense whatsoever, and it becomes senseless. And imagine if much of language were used that way, pretty soon things would have no meaning. And so, if in your outlook upon others, now we're talking now about the ego state, in a confused, split mind, you look on others with both a disdain and a judgment, as well as perhaps appreciation in a few ways. That's a double thought. It's two opposing thoughts trying to be combined into one. And when you add them together, it means nothing. And so, therefore, the mind does this quite a bit. It winds up feeling like empty and no feelings at all towards life and situations and people. And all this can be traced back to beliefs in the mind. So we have to get down to the most atomistic element, the most basic element, which are the symbols, the words that are used by our minds to describe our beliefs, our thoughts, and our feelings. Symbols. This section is about symbols. And as it says here, symbols which but represent ideas that cannot be must stand for an empty space and nothingness. So that would be a sense of nihilism and meaningless, to have a bunch of ideas in your mind that stand for an illusion, an unreality, a non-reality. That would cause one to feel meaningless and to regard situations as having no meaning. So, we need to just dive a little bit deeper on the role. Very few people think a linguist would think about these things a lot. The role of language in life, in culture, in the way we experience ourselves. But most people are not linguists, and they, they never think about these things. So we're going to take a moment, and I'm going to go off page and read some. Have Julie read some sections from other parts of a course that refer to how symbols are used, how they're misused, and how they can be corrected in their use.
Symbols, words, labels, representations, pictures, thoughts, ideas, beliefs, concepts, internal narratives. How do these relate logically? To the mind, they are objects used to construct a mental representation of the world, a world view, where each of us acts as our own private interpreter of our symbols. Symbols are essential to teaching and learning, for they are the means to communicate in ways the world can understand.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of fundamental. This is understood by linguists as well. Not only does this appear in Course in Miracles, but it appears in linguistic studies, that we assemble the things that we've heard and learned and read and experienced together in our mind. And like the way you remember a childhood experience, is represented in your mind by some images or some words, some names of the people that might have been there. And that is, we would call it a memory, but that memory is composed of elements which are listed here. And all that is cobbled together to become an interpretation of what happened in your past. This can easily be proven. We could all go to a dinner of 20 people and spend 3 or 4 hours there, and then have each person write down what their experience was like. And everybody would have slightly different experience of that evening, because we all did have different experiences, but also because the things that are meaningful to us are the things that we focus on. So this is done all the time. The key thing to remember is that you're using symbols all the time, that they're essential to learning, and they're used in the way we communicate and understand the world. So once you realize that in the general case, now we have to divide them into symbols of fear and illusions and symbols of love and truth. So their symbols are not all identical. So Jolie will go on.
But be you not deceived by symbols, lest they become the objects of fixation, excuse me, and interfere with your learning. Fixations are lacking in meaning, for they are not in line with your being. This is a state so seemingly unsafe that fear must rise.
Yeah, so what are we talking about? The example that comes to me, and I'm going to be general because I don't want to offend anyone, but when I was 7, 8 years old, my parents had certain prejudices that they would talk about. And at 7 or 8 years old, I kind of realized they had certain groups that they had outed, that they were derogatory towards. And as a 7-year-old, I didn't accept that. I challenged it in my own mind. But many children adopt the beliefs of their parents for themselves. And that becomes a lifelong fixation, such that they never challenge those beliefs. And so derogatory, stereotypical terms towards other groups become a part of their language and their symbol system, and they never question the fact that to even use those terms is an attack upon another. It becomes normalized to them, and especially if in not only their family system, but maybe their entire community reinforces these symbols, they can become fixated on those symbols, never really questioning the truthfulness of them or the basis for them. Well, the ego loves this stuff, to have for you to have a fixated set of symbols that you never question. And so, what would be an example of that? A more gentle example of that would be some forms of humor that make fun of someone who's different in some way. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of ways. I don't really want to go into all the dark ways in which prejudice and fixations show up. But know that the ego depends on you're developing a set of symbols and never questioning them and keeping them permanent in your mind, rigid and unchanging. The Holy Spirit has a completely opposite objective.
As the mind heals, our understanding of the meaning of symbols changes. For example, your understanding of the workbook lessons. Here we acknowledge the Holy Spirit, who acts as the one interpreter, providing a common language of forgiveness that lets us speak to all our brothers in symbols that all can understand.
Mm-hmm. So, the example I chose to use, which hopefully will resonate with each of you, is particularly I was thinking the first 25 workbook lessons. I know for a fact, I've talked to hundreds of people that said I had no idea what they were talking about or why we were doing these things. They would say something to the effect, it made no sense to me at all. And then guess what? If for those who stuck with it, perhaps finished all those lessons or restarted them, but 2, 3 years later, it makes perfect sense. The words did not change. The words were the same as the first time they read them, but the learning and understanding and use of those symbols has been acquired, this new learning, and that gives new meaning to the same words which were misunderstood before. And this is just one example, a very hopefully one that's very evident, but there are many other examples throughout the textbook and other parts of the Course of Miracles as well. Julie?
Thank you, Jonica. Yeah, this is so cool because in the beginning, I didn't understand how, in simple terms, the language of the early lessons was really talking about a way of being and a way of living that was applicable throughout every lesson. And so, thinking about synonyms here and what's on the screen, it's like, oh, so this is what they are talking about when there are instructions or cautions about assigning meaning. Like that's the whole curriculum of the course, is to train you on ways to assign meaning to everything that allow you to experience peace.
It is. And thank you, Julie. And so let's remember, why are we even examining such a thing? Because our entire thought system is based upon an assemblage of symbols, and you have your own private collection of symbols that are most prominent in your life and the meaning that you gave them. Our entire thought system is hinges on and looks to our language, our the words we use, the way the pictures we have in our mind to represent the world. And so that's where the error goes in, and that's where the correction needs to be made. All right, we'll go on.
The picture of your brother that you see means nothing. There is nothing to attack or to deny, to love or hate, or to endow with power or to see as weak. The picture has been wholly canceled out because it symbolized a contradiction that canceled out the thought it represents. And thus the picture has no cause at all. Who can perceive effect without a cause? What can the causeless be but nothingness? The picture of your brother that you see is wholly absent and has never been. Let then the empty space it occupies be recognized as vacant, and the time devoted to its seeing be perceived as idly spent time, a time unoccupied.
Mm-hmm. So they were referring to this idea of someone who, let's say, you've partly forgiven. Well, there's a double thought. What is a partial forgiveness? So that means a little forgiveness and a little unforgiveness. Well, that's a double thought. It cancels out. Have you forgiven them? No. Are they unforgiven? Well, not completely. Uh, so all of that winds up, what's it do to your thinking, to your conscious experience? It is just a waste. Here, I think it refers to it as perceiving it as unoccupied time. It's an empty space, vacant. Let then this be recognized as vacant. So throughout the course, it stresses it's about a full, unified commitment to an idea. So if you're going to forgive someone, the only way to do that is to totally forgive them. If they're to partially forgive them, is to still not forgive them. And so the mind gets stuck in this in between mode, which neither one nor another. This is idle, idly spent time, symbolizes a contradiction. And thus, there's nothing really there that can be honestly said or appreciated. All right, so we are talking about the way the ego traps us in our outlook towards other people, but this can be applied to other things as well. You could apply this to yourself. So let's make it very personal for a minute. Do you love yourself? And maybe some of us would say, well, I love some parts of me. Well, what about the other parts? Well, I'm a work in progress. Maybe not. Love that. Um, so there's an applicability to what we're talking about here that is widespread, though unrecognized. And like so many things in the course, it identifies activities that occur at a largely unconscious level and then raises them up and discusses them openly so that what was formerly unconscious can be made conscious. And only then can you change your mind and choose again. So this picture of a brother that means nothing, where you're neutral, supposedly neutral towards someone, you neither care for them nor disregard them. Many different forms this can take. You have a few grievances, but largely accept who they are, or maybe that's applied to yourself. You love parts of yourself, but other parts you do not love. So we'll call that an empty space. Julie?
An empty space that is not seen as filled, an unused interval of time not seen as spent and fully occupied, become a silent invitation to the truth to enter and to make itself at home. No preparation can be made that would enhance the invitation's real appeal. For what you leave as vacant, God will fill, and where He is, there must the truth abide. Unweakened power, with no opposite, is what creation is. For this there are no symbols. Nothing points beyond the truth, for what can stand for more than everything? Yet true undoing must be kind, and so the first replacement for your picture is another picture of another kind.
Mm-hmm. So what they're referring to here is really the fundamental process that is used again and again in healing the mind. It's talked about in the first 20 workbook lessons. I have no neutral thoughts. I see no neutral things. The idea is the mind will always, there is no permanent empty space in the mind. It will always be filled by something. They used to say nature abhors a vacuum. Well, in your mind, this quote empty space or neutral space will be filled with some kind of thought, whether it be illusions or the truth. So what we learn, however, is that if your mind is fixated on a grievance, a judgment, a hatred, then the empty space is the way out. The empty space is the direction towards which your mind must move in order for a new thought to replace it. This is not well understood, but it's a practice. And when you meditate, that every time you meditate should be an invitation for you to let go of the chatter, the monkey mind that messages that are going on, to let go of that and enter in to a quiet space where there is no thought or very little thought, very little chatter. That is an invitation to be filled with the Holy Spirit. That is your doorway in which the mind must pass through in order to receive the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So it says here, it's this space, empty space, is a silent invitation to the truth to enter and make itself at home. No preparation can be made that would enhance this invitation's real appeal. I really believe this. It's each and every minute is where your opportunity to invite that quiet, silent moment. You can't pre-configure a situation that would make it better. For in other words, so I don't mean to attack any forms of preparation, but some people might say, let's light a candle, burn some incense, put on quiet music, put on our favorite clothes, and sit in our favorite position facing towards the east. And now I'm ready to have an empty space. That would be preparation. And if that's what you've been taught, fine. If it comforts you, do so. But the Course teaches that no preparation can be made that would make your inviting the quiet more appealing. It's why? Because it's it's not an outward physical experience that you're inviting. It's an inward shift in consciousness. And I don't suggest you do it while driving, but it can be done anywhere at any time. You can be in a conversation with somebody and become quiet within. So, so the idea, and why would we do all that? Because you can't sustain that empty space for long. There are no neutral thoughts. It will eventually be filled. If you attempt to meditate, you can prove that to yourself. Thoughts are eventually going to come rushing back in. But we do it in service of hearing the voice of the Holy Spirit, of inviting the truth of the Holy Spirit to enter. Does this make sense? Is this understandable? So this is not the way the world teaches. So maybe this doesn't make sense in the conventional meaning of it fit the paradigms of which you are already familiar. But hopefully there's a spiritual reasoning to this that you can follow along. Lauren?
Yeah, I just want to share that, I struggle with meditating, and, I find I have resistance. And like the last couple of days, it's been interesting. And because I was always like, oh, my incense, oh, sage, want to put some music on, everything that you just said about preparing, right? And the last couple of days, I've just gotten naturally up at 6:30, 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and I said, I'm just gonna go sit, and I'm just gonna, tell Alexa 20 minutes timer, and that's it. And that, and so you're saying this is just really interesting, that because that's what I've been doing in my life. So
Nice, nice. That's a very positive sign. Yay. Heather?
I like what you just shared. It's also why I think why they call it the holy instant, because it doesn't take, hours of preparation or whatever. It can be an instant when I go into that space. And so they want to train us to flee to that secret place as quickly as possible, I think that it becomes our resource, and that we don't have to go through all the preparation and thinking that, I've got to, it's some kind of ritual that I've got to get there. That's like, it's like a child running to its mother when it falls down. It's like, I just got to get there. I just got to get there. And so that's the image that I like, that I just need to get into that holy space as quickly as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. I've shared this before, but in my own experience, I experienced it like, have you ever gone over a speed bump really slow? Like, I mean, about as slow as you can, so your tire just goes up to the top and rolls over to the other side real gently. I experience it like that. There's this seeming barrier in keeping the old mental chatter going. There's this resistance there. And then I reach a little point where just rise a little bit over this bump and just roll the other side. It seems like very undramatic, effortless. But I'm aware that I have to consciously choose to go there. This is what the invitation is involved. You have to welcome entering into this doorway and getting to the other side. Ultimately, this is about directing your mind towards the truth. And so who does that directing? You do. We'll go on.
As nothingness cannot be pictured, so there is no symbol for totality. Reality is ultimately known without a form, unpictured and unseen. Forgiveness is not yet a power known as wholly free of limits, yet it sets no limits you have chosen to impose. Forgiveness is the means by which the truth is represented temporarily. It lets the Holy Spirit make exchange of pictures possible until the time when aids are meaningless and learning done. No learning aid has use that can extend beyond the goal of learning. When its aim has been accomplished, it is functionless. Yet in the learning interval, it has a use that now you fear, but yet will love.
Mm-hmm. This is really helpful. So let's for a moment set the first two lines aside, where we talk about symbols of totality, and come back to that after we've discovered the intermediate stage, or reviewed that a little bit. So this is A Course in Miracles about helping our minds move from a completely untrained state where judgment and grievances and fear were considered the default mode, shifting the mind into a new perceptual order, which is in the direction of the eternal and of the ultimate totality. It's in the direction towards the eternal, but it's not there yet. It's an intermediate stage. So forgiveness is not yet a power unknown as wholly free of limits. So forgiveness still operates within a limited time, space, structure of words and ideas, physical bodies, still operates in the same environment where our confused mind operates, but now perceives everything according to a new symbol system, a new set of pictures. It Forgiveness lets the Holy Spirit make exchange of pictures possible. Not that we're forever going to be picturing reality in our minds, but first we have to be able to picture a life of peace and forgiveness and gentleness before we're ready to transition into an unlimited field of reality. So forgiveness is that intermediate stage. It's a learning aid, but it's a learning aid that will gear us towards the final step, which is total freedom. So it's a learning interval that has use now, but is not permanent. The permanent interval is what's referred to at the beginning of this paragraph, and it's which says there is no symbol for totality. There is no picture or words or ideas that can encompass infinite love. Reality is unknown. So reality is unpictured and unseen. It's experienced firsthand, but it's not represented in your little mind in a substitute manner. Pictures and words and symbols are substitutes for the experience. Reality is not encountered that way. That's what perception does, but reality is experienced firsthand. So what the Holy Spirit does is makes use of the skills you already have, which is to picture things in your mind, like you picture your past, or you picture your relationships. Like if I say your relationship with your dad, or your relationship with your mother, whatever it was, you have a picture of what that was like in your mind. And so the Holy Spirit is helping to substitute a new set of pictures, new set of symbols, which are gentle and kind and forgiving, that would allow your mind to be at peace. And in that state, you're then, when you reach what we would call complete peace, then the mind is ready to do without pictures at all. So forgiveness is a means by which the truth is represented temporarily. It's a representation, temporary representation in your mind until such time as you're ready for the final step, which is perfect union and oneness with the mind of God, the final step, which is unpictured and unseen. Is that clear? This is the same pattern we do throughout the Course of Miracles. 3 fundamental states of confused perception, of true perception, and into the level beyond perception, into ultimate oneness. The Course ends with total forgiveness. It does not teach how to experience ultimate oneness. Why? Because you can't teach ultimate oneness. You can experience it, but you can't represent it with words and ideas. It can't be taught. It must be experienced firsthand. Let's go on.
The picture of your brother, given you to occupy the space so lately left unoccupied and vacant, will not need defense of any kind, for you will give it overwhelming preference, nor delay an instant in deciding that it is the only one you want. It does not stand for double concepts. Though it is but half the picture and is incomplete, within itself it is the same. The other half of what it represents remains unknown, but is not canceled out. And thus is God left free to take the final step himself. For this you need no pictures and no learning aids. And what will ultimately take the place of every learning aid will merely be.
Mhm. So we have two ideas here. One is a paragraph, pay close attention to the words, the picture of your brother that is given you. It's given you by the Holy Spirit. So this is not the one that you had in judgment. This is the substitute picture. And then it says, it's still not a complete picture. It's still half a picture, but now it is characterized by forgiveness and kindness and joining and helpfulness and healing. But it's still only half the picture. There's still something more. And the other half is in the hands of God to give you in the final step. So you can think of that as something to look forward to. The other half perfectly complements the picture the Holy Spirit gave you. They are not in disagreement, so they're complementary, but there's still more to recognize about your relationship to creation than simply forgiveness and kindness and charity and healing and hope, helpfulness. There's a level beyond that that the Creator has in store for us.
Forgiveness vanishes and symbols fade, and nothing that the eyes have ever seen or ears have heard remains to be perceived. A power wholly limitless has come, not to destroy, but to receive its own. There is no choice of function anywhere. The choice you feared to lose, you never had. Yet only this appears to interfere with power unlimited and single thoughts, complete and happy without opposite. You do not know the peace of power that opposes nothing. Yet no other kind can be at all. Give welcome to the power beyond forgiveness and beyond the world of symbols and of limitations. He would merely be, and so he merely is.
Mhm. So we have said many times that the Course does not teach how you can experience perfect oneness and unlimited love. What it does teach is how you can position yourself at the gateway to unlimited love and perfect oneness. We call it the gates of heaven as a symbol. That if that works for those words, the Course brings you to the gates of heaven, but you're entering in through the gates is an experience that God will draw you in when you're ready. So the Course's goal is to get you to the gates. Trust me, that's a big progress compared to being in the ancient prison of the ego's hell. The gates of heaven is we would think that we were in heaven by comparison to the ancient prison of the ego. So that's what they're referring to in this last paragraph, where they say forgiveness has vanished and the symbols fade. We're talking about crossing over into perfect oneness, where a power wholly limitless has come, and where you no longer, this is a state that is beyond choosing. So before we speak of that, let's just remember that in our healing mode, you have to choose to want to be healed and to train your mind. It's a choice. Your exercise a choice. But when we enter into a state of perfect oneness, there's no opposites to choose between. There's only one item on the menu, and that's unconditional love. So it's no choice of function anywhere. In fact, it was an illusion that you could choose the opposite. So there's no interference, there's no opposite, there's no opposition. And so it's perfection of oneness. And so here's the transcendent message. That power that's unlimited is a part of your eternal nature. It's not a place on the other side of the gates of heaven. It's a state or a condition of union with the creator and creation. And that's how you were brought into being, in union with the creator and creation. This is another way of saying that that state is already within you. It's the heaven within, or the kingdom of heaven within, if you wish those terms. It's the Christ consciousness already within you that is temporarily covered over by a confused set of symbols that contradict each other. And so this, I'll want to illustrate here. So the heaven within you is temporarily covered over by a confused set of symbols. And so the goal of this course is to help discard those confused symbols and replace them with a new set of symbols that the Holy Spirit gives us. So, and those symbols are perfectly consistent with the heaven that's within you. It's the other half that we read earlier, that when you forgive your brother, you have a new picture of them, but it's still only a half a picture. So these new symbols are still only half the picture. They're not the final picture. God's gift to you is the final picture. And so in fact, this state of ultimate oneness is in truth a returning to your original state, the way you were created. It's not new at all. It's a remembering, a returning, a recognizing of what was given you in creation. And so, wow, that's a powerful concept. And the symbols and ideas that fill our mind are the working, that's what we work on to begin this healing process. That's what those workbook lessons are all about, is dumping the old ideas, the old symbols that imply judgment and revenge and competition and fighting and conflict, dumping them, undoing them, and having them replaced by the pictures of the Holy Spirit. Kathy?
Yeah, I recently started to think of God as a mentor. And how is God? God is gentle. That's the one word that comes to me when I think of God. He speaks gently and he is very gentle, soft-spoken, but yet, masculine. And I found so much peace in that. And when I think of myself as being gentle to myself and others, it brings me to a place of love that I haven't really feel like I've been before. So I just wanted to put that idea out there because I think God is very gentle. And I think the course says it, but it doesn't maybe say it as much as other things. And I don't know, it makes my heart warm.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Kathy. That's my experience of it as well. Rather than a profound and dramatic transition, one day everything is different. I experience it more like it's like getting stronger, or like any growth experience. It just comes days and weeks at a time, and all of a sudden I realize I'm already not the person I used to be. It's already happened, and I didn't even catch on until some simple self-realization that I just am not suffering like I used to. And so very gentle. For me, one of the most gentle experiences that I've ever had. I want to just share one more thing, which is a summary format. You probably don't need to hear this, but I had prepared it. So, and we have a few minutes, so let's take advantage of it. So we're talking about going beyond symbols. So there are 3 stages to it. This is true throughout A Course in Miracles. We're focusing on the symbol aspect of it today, but there are other aspects that are in these 3 stages. And the false perception being one stage, true perception, which is where the healing occurs, and then ultimately awakening to knowledge. And as you move through those 3 stages, your experience with symbols changes. So we begin with the ego state, which is contradictory symbols, love and hate, forgiveness and judgment, all mixed together. This is the essence of a confused mind. It's conflicted because it's holding all this, attempting to hold all this in mind. And the ego would have you become rigid about these contradictions, fixated on them, so that you remain stuck. And this is what the undoing is about, is your willingness to let go of that. And what is psychologically noteworthy is what you're letting go of, you experience as your memories of the past and the way you identified yourself in the past. You're letting go of what you thought you were. So psychologically, that there's a real twister there. Well, if I'm letting go of that, then what am I receiving instead? What's replacing it? And so that's where the second stage comes in. We need the Holy Spirit for that. We cannot guide ourselves through the second stage. That's where forgiveness is being offered, and new meanings are being learned. New symbols are being given. That these symbols have the power of spirit behind them. They remind us of who we truly are. They form a new language, a common language of forgiveness that can be easily shared with others who are pursuing a path of forgiveness. And that promotes understanding. So instead of people trying to communicate out of confused messages with contradictory symbols, now we're sharing a common language, a common understanding. That's experienced in this group and other, it's experienced in many different groups. And it's very satisfying to be understood, because it means we can communicate in meaningful ways. And all of that is still half of the picture. There's another half which comes in the third stage. And that's the stage that we refer to beyond all symbols. That's the stage of ultimate oneness. You cannot teach that stage. We can speak of it, but we can't tell you how to do it because there's nothing, there's no words or symbols that are adequate for it. And so it is an ultimate stage that results in a qualitative difference. It's not just a little bit same thing, only on a little bit higher plane. It is a magnificently big qualitative jump into a direct experience of divine reality. It has no limits. It has no symbols. It has no words. It's the original state. And when you experience it, you will realize you have returned home. You are home once again. So that's as far as we're going to read today. These are fairly short sections, but very powerful. And we will discuss replacement of old symbols with new symbols again and again, because they are and the workbook lessons particularly aid you in introducing new ideas which are given by the Holy Spirit, and working with those ideas will gently, you will acquire this new language of forgiveness. And before you know it, it'll just be your natural state, your default mode. And so it's a wonderful experience to go through. And I'm honored to be able to share that in the way that we do. Thank you all. Julie, thank you for reading. I look forward to getting together again.
Julie. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, everyone. You're welcome. Thank you.
Good
Peace
night,
out.
everybody.
Thanks,
Julie.
Julie.
Thanks,
You're
Shanika.
welcome. Good night.
Everyone.
Good night.